Hey there, welcome to episode 98 of the Social Business Engine podcast, the podcast where I invite thought leaders from all industries to share their expertise on social and digital communications best practices. I'm Bernie Borges from Find and Convert and your host of the Social Business Engine podcast. On this episode, you are going to meet Andrea Kuchinski. Andrea's background is graphic design. Now, she was driven by a passion to change the public perception of fitness for the everyday woman, regardless of her height, weight, speed, or athletic ability. So, Andrea found her voice among a niche audience of women who shared the same passion, and she launched her apparel fitness company that's called From Thick to Thin. So on this episode, Andrea shares her journey on this niche entrepreneurial adventure and the role of content and social media. Now, this episode is in cooperation with Visually, a leader in visual content development, as their name clearly says. We have published Social Business Journal Volume 7 with Visually, and it's titled Winning Through Niche Content Marketing. This journal features 5 brands who are winning by being very niched in their approach to reaching and engaging their customer through content. In fact, you're getting a sneak preview of this journal today because Andrea Kuchinski is one of those brands showcased in this journal. Now, of course, this journal is available at our show notes page for this episode, as well as at our journals page, and you can find both at our website, socialbusinessengine.com. And now, let's get to my interview with Andrea Kuchinski, owner of Thick to Thin. Andrea, welcome to the Social Business Engine podcast.
Hi, Bernie. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, terrific. I'm excited for our conversation today. And Andrea, as you know, because you have listened to some of our podcasts on the Social Business Engine, you know that many of the guests that I have had on my show come from big companies like Cisco and IBM and Dell. And I'm excited to share your story because I know that I have listeners who can relate to your story, Andrea. I know that I have listeners that are either entrepreneurs or even if they work in a corporate setting, they have an entrepreneurial spirit. And you've got a great story. So let's begin with kind of the backstory. Let's kind of start with your whole story of how you got to the point where you launched Thick to Thin.
Well, Bernie, it's such a long, tragic tale. Not tragic, but it's a long tale, so I'll go as quickly as possible. Initially, I just started blogging, and I was in no way, shape, or form a blogger, and I never said I was, and I prefaced almost every single blog post with, I am a horrible writer.
And what were you blogging about? What was your blogging strategy, Andrea?
I was personally just blogging about weight loss and trying to get myself into better shape and to get healthy.
Okay.
And I needed that blogging outlet to kind of hold me to some sort of accountability because it wasn't working in my everyday life with my everyday friends. So I started blogging and I realized that I was, gaining a following, which was weird because I, again, like I said, never said I was a blogger.
Mm-hmm.
But as I was starting that journey of losing weight and being real and being funny and people were responding, I started going out and shopping for clothing and realizing that the big names in the fitness apparel industry were not catering to me and were not catering to people who were overweight that needed to lose weight to be healthy and to live a long, vivacious life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that was frustrating because I had a lot of friends that were size small and I couldn't go shopping with them.
Mm-hmm.
And in a world where being healthy is number one and being healthy is how you get your longevity, like this is a big part of that. So being able to shop was huge for me. And knowing that I had other people out there, and it wasn't just a plus size problem, right? I mean, obviously that one segment was, they weren't catering to anyone outside of an extra large. But the problem was more about, like, we are all supposed to be healthy and we are all supposed to love our bodies, but we're being shamed by not fitting into a certain size range.
Okay.
So I was blowing and I was realizing this problem. And as a graphic designer, I always had this vision, and as an entrepreneur, I always knew I would have my own product. And that's kind of where it clicked. I said to myself, and I said to my followers, I was like, there is a huge problem out there, and I want to make a change in doing so. And that's kind of how I got started. I found an apparel line that was kind of out there right now. Like, if you're familiar with the printing process, you can purchase wholesale, all that kind of stuff. But they actually ran up to a size 2X. So I said, let's start there. And let's put inspirational, motivational sayings on there so that it not only got you excited about working out and getting healthy and getting to a healthy size or a healthy lifestyle, but it's also motivating the people that are reading your apparel, right? Reading your shirt.
So you're saying you went out and identified first of all, you identified what the problem was. You communicated that to your following. And did your following give you a big high five? I mean, did you hear from them with loud screams, or the equivalent of digital loud screams saying, yes, Andrea, you're right, go fix this?
Yeah, it was definitely a big virtual high five. For me, because I was so transparent with everything I was doing. I mean, I was transparent with my life. I was telling a story. I was relating to people. I was an everyday woman who wasn't necessarily morbidly obese, but I am still on the larger size. And because of that, people said to me, you can't do it, or why would you do it? But to me, it was a greater good, right? It was, I need to make a difference. I need everyone to be included, and everyone kind of got on board, whether you were small or large. Everyone was getting on board with that notion of including everyone.
So being inclusive, yeah, okay. That's interesting. We've covered that topic in a different context before on this podcast, but the concept of inclusive is big. So everybody was on board, and then you went out and identified a line of clothing. Was that your first step?
Yep, I identified a line of clothing that would allow us to get up to a 2X to start, while seeking out other ways to get 3, 4, 5X. And started there and knew that it would take a lot more to get more sizes in one place. But I knew that, eventually we would get there. And we did last year. We launched a Kickstarter, and we are now in production of our first couple pieces of our own line that will be manufactured from size extra small to 5XL.
Okay. From extra small. Wow.
Yep.
Okay. So you run the whole spectrum then.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. Awesome. So tell me about the inspirational sayings and how do you define or decide what they're going to be?
So initially, this was kind of before Pinterest was really big and people were pinning, inspirational sayings, and it was all over Facebook. I sat out and I was on Pinterest and I was like, why are these virtual, right? Let's put them on our shirts. Let's put these sayings that mean something to me and mean something to the people reading them out there in the world. And a lot, again, this is kind of before Pinterest and also Etsy. Like, Pinterest was new and Etsy was new. Now everyone's printing sayings on shirts. But thankfully, we have a good movement behind ours. So we curated kind of some of those sayings. We came up with some of our own. For us, it was more about you wearing a statement about who you are instead of being a brand message for us, right? So instead of Nike swooshes or just do it, it's something that really spoke to the person that wore it, how they were feeling, how they, it could be funny, it could be motivational, whatever it is. You know, we have a wide variety, but it was really something so that our audience and our customer base could have something that says something about them.
Okay, so you said a couple of things. Well, you didn't. I said in my introduction that you're a graphic designer by background, but then you also said, Andrea, that you always had an entrepreneurial spirit. You knew that eventually you'd do something, and then when this light bulb, and those are my words, went off for you, you took the leap, and you of course had a lot of passion and conviction behind it. So let's talk a little bit about, since this is the Social Business Engine podcast, how you shaped your content strategy, your social strategy to drive your business.
Yeah, so that was fun, I think, in a way, because we were just going at social media from like a very personable level, right? Back in like 2014, Facebook was huge. And for us, it was huge because we could be real out there and people could interact with us. And for us, we were pushing the product every once in a while, but it was more about the community that we were growing. And I think that really resonated well with people because they were engaging with us, but they felt like they were part of a brand and part of a movement and a community instead of just another customer, right? So we really leveraged that content by making it very real, very personal. You know, on Facebook, it's a lot of me, which is weird. But it's the content that people want. They want to see the face behind the brand. They want to feel the transparency. And putting that into a content strategy really helped us because it wasn't necessarily about selling. I mean, that obviously ultimately is the end goal, but for us, it was just about bringing people together.
Okay. So as far as the content is concerned, I know, you've got your website. On your website, you have a blog. You have your Facebook page. How do you bring all those together in terms of your content strategy? And let me clarify my question a little bit, Andrea, because as your business has been evolving, you've got your own product line and you get busy, right? You're probably pretty busy. Am I right?
Yes. Oh my God. So busy.
Yeah. So do you ever feel like you're overwhelmed with your content strategy? How are you handling that as your business is evolving?
Yes. Overwhelmed, I feel like, is an understatement. I feel as any small entrepreneur, small business owner understands, is when your business is growing and flourishing, you are wearing so many hats. And on one end, it's been great for me because I've really gained so much knowledge and I've pushed myself to learn about business and learn more about marketing and more about content strategy. But I've also made relationships with outside vendors that have been able to help us. And we are growing. And this year, 2016 is going to be huge for us. And we're creating, a lot of serial content and a lot of stuff that will be a lot more organized because, like you said, Bernie, like you can't do everything. So last year I used a lot of outside vendors, as we could, financially. But this year, because we're really growing, we have the budget to grow the content even more and make sure we have a consistent voice and make sure that we are giving the people still what they want.
And is any of that content, with that consistent voice, is any of that content going to be handled by someone other than yourself?
Yes, it's going to be tricky.
Are you struggling in answering that question so honestly? Not that I expect you not to be honest, but because you created that content yourself from day one, and now you're saying someone else is going to be helping you with that. How do you feel about that?
It's hard. It's very hard. I think a lot of big brands spend a lot of money creating a story, right? A story to tell, whether it's their big marketing pitch for the year or what have you. But we have that story and we have that story behind our brand. So because it's so intricate to who I am, and it's really me and my passion and my team's passion, it is going to be tough to work with someone else to create that content. So I'm hoping it'll be a very close strategic relationship, so that we don't lose the voice of the brand, because that's what I'm really scared about, is really losing that voice.
Well, yeah, and depending on how you're doing that and who you're working with, it's really just about defining that strategy. So, and then of course working with the right partners to create that content to maintain that voice. Because you hit on a key point, Andrea, and that is that brands deal with this all the time. Brands, as large as Cisco and other big brands that I've had on my show, they have a voice, but there isn't any one person that can be that voice, right? Because they're big brands. So they work hard to define that voice, and it's no different for you at Thick to Thin. You define that voice, and then you pick the partners, or maybe it's one partner that you feel confident because they prove to you that they can deliver the content that is in your voice. So that's kind of what it's about. So, hey, a little free coaching here along the way. Hope you don't mind that.
No, that's awesome, Bernie. Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about how you're using social media now in 2016. You've been active on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. You even mentioned Periscope, and you mentioned Pinterest. So maybe you can just kind of characterize, because again, you're growing. There's only so much you can do. Have you decided which social channels you're going to focus on, or are you trying to do them all?
So that's very interesting, because, Facebook has always been our number one platform. We have the biggest following there. We have the biggest interaction there. And like what has actually been mentioned in prior, podcasts, that monetization of everything is really starting to hit hard on small businesses. And where Facebook was once a community that was really easy for people to see our posts and engage, now it's how much money can I throw at that so that I can get people to engage. And it kind of puts a damper on things, and it defeats you a little bit, because for me personally, Facebook was just a great outlet to, on a larger scale, connect with people. And I don't want to have to pay for that, right? I don't want to have to pay to interact with my customers. So, we're using tools like Facebook groups. We're starting to get out there on Instagram and Twitter, but it's not as big of a platform for us. I'm really excited for Facebook Live to come out, because I think we do get a lot of feedback and a lot of good interaction when we do videos. And I think the Facebook Live will help do that. Whereas Periscope, we just don't have a following yet. But if we can use our following that we already have on Facebook to start doing live video and interact more, it's going to be beneficial to us. So as much as difficult as it is right now, Bernie, with Facebook, that's still going to be our number one platform. And then hopefully just roll out some strategies to get, Twitter going a little bit more, and get Periscope and that kind of stuff. But we're going to stick with Facebook for now.
Well, it's what kind of got you to where you are in terms of your audience, that along with your blog. So now, one thing that for those who are listening that haven't yet downloaded the Visually journal that I promoted at the beginning of the introduction, and I'm going to mention it again, I really recommend you do that, because you'll see lots of great photos, and you have done a terrific job, Andrea, of taking lots of great photos of your community, just women like yourself that are just, you can see the enthusiasm, you can see the energy, you can see the happiness and the smiles, and and everybody is just really part of that community. I mean, that community sense comes through, it shines through with those images. So anything that you can do to get those images out into the world to reach your audience, that's great. So I encourage you to continue to do that.
Yes, definitely. Our customers are the best, and they really eat, live, breathe our mission, and they want a better world for their daughters and for themselves. And they want, body positivity to really come to the forefront, and they want to see this change in how we're looked at as, as females and stuff. So to me, like, everyone that shops with us really shops with us because they know our mission, they read about us, and they understand that we have something more than just apparel.
Awesome. So what do you see in store for 2016? We're recording this early in the year, so anybody might be listening to this, at any point in time during the year. What do you see in store for the year?
We have a lot of awesome, like I said earlier, serial content coming out. We have a lot of, we're really establishing our movement. So we're really hoping to kind of disrupt this industry this year and show the world who we are on a larger scale. And we're excited to do that because, like I keep saying, we have a greater good, right? And we really thrive on that. So 2016 for us is like the big push of disrupting and making a change and annoying these big guys and, showing the world who we are and what we're about.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, Andrea, so we are at a point in this episode where I would like to summarize the story that you've shared here today on the podcast. And then I'm going to ask you to respond to my summary and elaborate on anything that you'd like to elaborate on. And then I will ask you my final one-thing question. So here we go, Andrea. You told me that you started this whole journey, this thick to thin journey, by blogging about your trying to lose weight and just get in better shape and get healthy. And little by little, you started to gain a following. And then you realized that you were onto something here. You always had a kind of an entrepreneurial spirit. You started thick to thin. And what your thick to thin customers are, they are women, and they understand your mission. They want a better world for their daughters and for themselves. And so you have been producing content and selling your apparel. You mentioned that this year you're going to be producing serial content and that you really want to establish a movement, disrupt the industry, and really stay focused on the greater good. Now, kind of back to a little bit your backstory, because I kind of jumped ahead to this year. You told me that you started first to shop for fitness apparel and realized that everything out there was anything but a plus size, and so you had difficulty finding it. But more than anything, what you discovered was that there was kind of shame. You felt shameful, if you will, by being a certain size. At least that's how you were made to feel by the apparel that you found. So you really discovered that this was not just a can't find the apparel issue, but kind of a bigger issue. And as you began to communicate that and share your frustration with your audience gave you a big digital high five. And you said you want to make a difference. You want to, like you said, disrupt the industry. And you really discovered that your audience was behind you. They were on board. So the first thing you did was you purchased a line of clothing, and you started with just a 2X size. And while you were looking for bigger sizes for 3X and more, and then you ran a Kickstarter campaign, and that put you in a position to expand your product line from extra small all the way to 5XL. And now your apparel has inspirational sayings on it. And those sayings are really there to make a statement about the individual and not about the brand. And that's a big difference from other traditional fitness apparel. Now, of course, we talked about how you use social media and the content that you produce. You said you started out mostly using social, kind of telling your story very personally, very authentic. And you didn't use the word raw, but I kind of see it that way. I think you've been very raw in really who you are. And so originally you were very focused on building a community, mostly on Facebook. And your content strategy was a combination of blogging and then just your posting on social media, mostly Facebook. But you also realized that you're kind of overwhelmed now because as your business is growing, you realize you need to continue to produce content, but also your business needs attention. So you've been building relationships, and you're really now starting to build some serial content, like I mentioned, for 2016. And in working with content partners, you're really focused on having a consistent voice that really speaks to who you are, because thick to thin, the story is you. You are the brand behind it. So the whole content production part of it for 2016 has to be very strategic for you. So, and then on continuing on social media, you mentioned that you'll probably continue to focus on Facebook because it has the biggest following, even though it's not as easy as it used to be because of the whole pay-to-play thing. Now, you reaching your audience for free organically is just not, nearly what it used to be. So now you're experimenting with Facebook groups, also with Facebook Live. As you mentioned, video can really help you get great feedback and again, reach your audience. And then, you're also out there on Instagram and Twitter, but I think you said that, Facebook is your primary go-to social channel. So coming full circle, thick to thin's really a movement, and you're really out to disrupt the industry and tell the story bigger than just fitness apparel, but to really empower women to be themselves in being healthy. So, Andrea, please chime in with anything you'd like to elaborate on or even correct if I got something wrong in my summary.
No, that was great. I mean, that's everything that we're doing right now in a nutshell.
Awesome. Okay, well, Andrea, this is the part of the podcast where I ask you my one thing question. And this is where I just ask if there's one thing that you could leave my listeners with as an actionable takeaway from this conversation, what would that be?
I think my one piece of advice would be, if you're scared to take a leap and do something that you're really passionate about, don't be. It'll end up working out if you really have that passion and that love for what you're doing. So I just recommend, if you're nervous or worried, just forget about it and just do it. Take that leap and start something that matters and make a difference if that's really what you want to do.
Cool. Now, I might edit out the just do it part. No, I'm kidding. I'm not going to edit that out, even though that's tied to a big brand. But I love it. Take the leap. If you have a passion for something, don't be scared. I love that. And just take the leap. I can relate to that. When I launched my business almost 14 years ago, and so a lot of people listening to this podcast either are already there or have some passion that I think you have just motivated them. So thank you for sharing that. Well, Andrea, where would you like to send people online to learn more about you and Thick to Thin?
So our website is thick-to-thin.com. We're working on that. I know it's not ideal. So I encourage people to visit us on our website and then, search for us on Facebook. I'm sure the links will all be here too. Mm-hmm. But really engage with us on Facebook. It's the best place for your feedback and to communicate with me. And that's, really where I want people to go.
Fantastic. Well, Andrea, my listeners know that we will link that up in the show notes, and we will have some images in there as well that really help tell your story. So we will have that available. Andrea, thank you so much for joining me here today on the Social Business Engine podcast and sharing your story, thick to thin, your passion. It really is everything that I was looking forward to and more.
Thanks, Bernie. I really had a great time.
Terrific. Well, I hope that you enjoyed my conversation with Andrea Kuchinski from Thick to Thin. What an inspiring story. And before we sign off, I do want to remind you that this episode is in cooperation with Visually, a leader in visual content development, just as their name says. We have published Social Business Journal Volume 7 with Visually, titled Winning Through Niche Content Marketing. This journal features 5 brands who are winning by being very niched in their approach to reaching and engaging their customer through their content, and that includes Andrea Kuchinski. Now, this journal is linked from our show notes page for this episode, as well as at our journals page, and you can find both at our website at socialbusinessengine.com. Hey, if you're subscribed by email to get our weekly podcast updates, which we send every Friday, then this journal has already hit your inbox, so go look for it. And if you're not subscribed to our weekly updates by email, then just visit the subscribe page on our website. If you're a regular listener to the Social Business Engine podcast, thank you. And if this is your first time listening, well, thank you as well. I really, really appreciate your time. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope that you'll push the subscribe button on your podcast player so that you get each of our weekly episodes delivered to your player automatically. And I would be really grateful if you would write a review on iTunes and share your sentiments about what you like about the podcast or maybe ways to improve it or whatever you want to share. Reviews really help others discover the podcast, and I really welcome the feedback. We have a direct link to this podcast in iTunes. Just go to socialbusinessengine.com/iTunes. And lastly, I invite you to engage with me on Twitter. I am at Bernie Borges. Our podcast handle on Twitter is at SBEngine. And we also have a Facebook page appropriately named facebook.com/socialbusinessengine. And our hashtag is SBE Show. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I want to thank my guest once again, Andrea Kuchinski, owner of Thick to Thin. This is Bernie Borges of Find and Convert, wishing you continued success on your social business journey.